How do you install the operating system on a laptop when you haven't got a floppy drive or a CD-ROM drive? That's the challenge I've got with the HP Omnibook 900. And in this video, I'm going to show you how I'm going to use a different computer, a Dell computer running Windows XP, to put an operating system onto the disk manually, then fit it into the HP Omnibook and get it to boot so we can install Windows NT Workstation. And stick around till right at the end of the video when I've got a little gotcha that came up I've never even had happen to me before, but I think I've got the right solution to it, and something's coming for the video after this that's going to fix it. Right, let's get cracking. This is my Dell Optiplex 320. I always had a workshop PC in my career. You'd have it on the bench and it was something with the side off all the time, and you'd go to it and you'd use it for backing up machines or putting discs into, that kind of stuff. And that's what we're going to do with this computer. We're going to use this as our way of getting an operating system onto the disk for the Omnibook. Here we've got SATA connectors. So we've got SATA power, and we have the SATA connector that goes to the motherboard, and we're going to use those to connect to our disk. But if you remember rightly, we've got an IDE disk, so we're going to need something that goes in between the IDE disk and the SATA connectors, and I'll show you what that is now. Right, here's the hard drive, and as you can see, we have got the regular pins, and that's not going to connect to the SATA that we've got on this Dell computer. So what we have here is this device, which connects SATA on this side to IDE on this side. Now we've got to match up the blanking pin here. There is a blanking pin that you can see there. We need to match that up here. So I'm going to do that now and put that in place. There we go. So that sits on there on the hard drive. And now we're going to take that down and put that into the Dell computer here so that we can boot it up and put an operating system onto this disk. Okay, I'm going to connect now the SATA power here. There we go. And the SATA connector to the motherboard there. And then I'll sit that on the side there. This was quite common to work this way with an open side on a PC all the time. I know you're supposed to use anti-static strips and all that kind of stuff, but none of us ever did. And as you'll probably see, it very, very rarely ever had an issue. Next thing, let's cut to using Windows XP and see this as a drive in XP. Okay, here we are in Windows XP, and I've opened up Computer Management, Disk Management, and here is our 30GB disk. What I'm going to do is create a new partition for us to install NT Workstation onto. And I make it small because NT Workstation couldn't detect very large partitions. I'm going to make it 1024, which it will be able to understand. We'll give it the drive letter D, and I'm going to call it boot for the boot volume. And it needs to be FAT, which will enable me to install FreeDOS onto this. Okay, let's format that and get that ready to go. Okay, so we've got the partition there, which is ready for us to put FreeDOS onto. I'm going to right click on it and mark it as active, which means it's a bootable partition, and it will be able to start up in the Omnibook laptop. Next, we need to get FreeDOS onto this disk. So we'll bring up the disk here, and I've got a folder here for FreeDOS, and I've got an image file, which is the floppy disk for FreeDOS, which I can mount now as a floppy disk in Windows XP. Okay, that's got that mounted. So here's our disk. And the files that we need to get this to boot will be the kernel.sys file. I'll also need command.com, which is in the FreeDOS folder in bin. And there we have command.com. So I'm going to copy that, paste that into here. This will mean that this is now bootable in FreeDOS back on the HP laptop. But that's not going to get NT Workstation onto it. Next thing I need to do is get a copy of NT Workstation and copy the i386 folder onto it. So I have that here as well. And that again is in another image. I'm going to mount that as a CD-ROM. It's an ISO file, which is a copy of a CD-ROM drive. And there is the i386 directory. So I'm going to copy that and put that onto the disk. And that'll take a few seconds to copy over. And the plan is put this back into the HP Omnibook, boot the Omnibook, it boots to DOS. Then in DOS mode, we'll copy, well, we've copied it over in fact. In DOS mode, we'll go into i386 and we'll run the WinNT setup, which will start the installation of Windows NT onto this hard drive inside the laptop. So let's get it back into the laptop and boot that up. Here's the hard drive back with the HP laptop. I'm going to get the backplane adapter now, and I'm going to fit that onto the hard disk, which goes in place. There we go. That is nicely in place. And then the hard drive slides into the slot on the laptop. Pushes in. Done. Now, let's get it booted. Hard drive in the laptop, and we are booting up the Omnibook 900. There's the disk. The SanDisk was detected by the BIOS. Information here, I think, about an original partition that must have been on the disk that came with the laptop. BIOS is going over. Next, we're going to drop into FreeDOS, I hope. Yes, there we are. We're into DOS. So what we can do now is you press enter in here, and that will just set the time and then enable us to get to the command prompt in DOS. Here we go. Right, I'm going to change directory to the i386 directory, and then I'm going to run the winnt command to install NT with these switches. B, so it doesn't create the setup disks. I'm going to use C to skip the file check at the start, and L to log the information to a text file. And I'll press enter, and then enter again to tell it where the setup files are. And now setup is going to go through and copy all the files to the disk and then restart. So let's skip through that now and speed that process up and see what happens when we get to the reboot. I've got the installation here actually on 20+ clip speed, which shows how long it takes to copy the files, and that's copying to an SSD. So copying back years ago would have taken a long time. We're going to restart the laptop now. Again, this is also sped up as well. And this is what we get. A blinking cursor in the top left-hand corner of the screen, and it doesn't go any further because I left it there. So what does this mean? Well, it means we're not installing Windows NT Workstation just yet. Next thing, I'm going to try and install Windows 98. That was more tolerant of different types of hardware, and it was easier to install than NT Workstation. Going to go back now and change the hard disk to boot to FreeDOS again, and this time we're going to use the Win98 folder and set up Windows 98. Back in FreeDOS again. This time let's install Windows 98. We'll change to that directory and then use the setup command for Windows 98. Setup NHIE, and it will do a check of the disk first, and I get an error about conventional memory, 16 meg. This was something I'd forgotten about, and because I'm using FreeDOS, I need to use setup/im/is, which is don't do the conventional memory check, don't scan the disk for speed. Let's go again. That's better. Okay, 98 is going to go through. Let's whiz past this and see what happens when we get to the restart of Windows 98 installation. I noticed in the corner it had said you can install Windows into any other folder than Windows, but no one ever did. Okay, we've restarted. What's going to happen? The same problem, blinking cursor top left corner. Both installations, NT Workstation and Windows 98, result in the same issue, blinking cursor top left corner. It can't boot into the next portion of the setup. I could swap this SanDisk out though, because this is a modern SSD disk in a very old machine, and put in a traditional IDE mechanical hard drive. I'll save you the suspense of going through all of that one. I've done it and it didn't make any difference. But I didn't have the size of IDE drive that came with the laptop when it was first shipped. I only have a 60GB IDE drive, and that's bigger than what was shipped with this. The Omnibook 900 was specified with 6GB, 6.4GB and 12GB IBM IDE hard drive, and I haven't got any of those. So here's my thinking. The drives I've got are too big for this laptop to detect at the next stage of the setup. The BIOS can recognise the cylinders, the BIOS can recognise the SanDisk, because there is a protocol there that the BIOS understands from the hard drive. And the setup can work at the first portion, the MS-DOS portion. It can copy the files to the disk. But I reckon when it's booting and it wants to switch to the next part of the GUI installation, there's something about the connection between the motherboard, the CPU and the hard drive where it can't understand the size of the disks, because the disks are too big for what that device is expecting. Which means I need to get a smaller disk. back to eBay it is for me, and time to get an IDE drive that's 12 gigabytes or less. As it was on Blue Peter, here's one I made earlier. Yes, I've been on eBay and I've got myself an IDE drive from IBM that is 6 gigabytes in size, and it comes with a chassis tray as well, which is quite handy. Let's get this connected up to the Dell computer now and try it out with this disk. Hard drive's connected. Let's start up the Dell. Hang on a minute. That doesn't sound too clever. If you're unfamiliar with this sound, it is the sound that a mechanical hard drive makes when it's failing, or in this case I suspect completely and utterly failed because it can't even get past the BIOS. Used to get these regularly back when I worked in the early noughties, and there were a couple of solutions if it had customer data on it that you could take. One was you'd give it a quick tap on the side of the desk and that might loosen up the head or something like that. And the other was we'd literally put it in a plastic bag and stick it in the fridge for an hour, get it cold because it might have overheated, and if you got it cold enough you might be able to get connected to it long enough to get some data off it. However, this one is dead. It's gone, it's bereft of life, it is pushing up the daisies and all of that business. So no good. I'm going to have to get another one off eBay now. I don't have another disc to carry on with. I have had to go to eBay. But I found one and I've ordered it, and it was £15. Coming soon. Hopefully it's going to do just the job we need. Because if that drive doesn't work and we can't boot Windows 98 with it in the laptop, then that's the end for the Omnibook 900 build and its playlist. It's game over. I could hold out for the external caddy, and I could hold out for the external floppy bay and the CD bay to fit in that caddy and then install it in the way it would have been installed when it was first bought. But I suspect that it won't make any difference. I've already got the files on the hard drive, and I've already got the hard drive in the machine booted into DOS. The problem is probably that the laptop is beyond repair and knackered. But I'm hopeful it isn't. I'm really hopeful that it isn't. And when we get the appropriate sized IDE disk and we get it in here, it's going to work and we can continue on the journey with the 900 series. I hope you're enjoying it so far. Let me know in the comments what you think about this whole project. Am I wasting my time, or is it a bit of fun to follow along with what I'm doing? Give me a like and a subscribe because that means loads, and I'll catch you on the next video. Ta-da! Some of you might have wondered what this was all about that came up. Well, it turns out it happened when I took the memory out on the keyboard replacement and reseated it, and it caused this error. And this error is about a hibernation file. PhDisk enables you to set a hibernation file on the laptop. So if the laptop suddenly lost all its power, the information that you were working on was written into a hibernation file so you didn't lose it. And this is saying it can't find the hibernation file on the hard drive, and to run PhDisk from DOS or from the operating system on the laptop and recreate that file. So if you are curious, that's what this is about.